They left me in the middle of the woods, with nothing but a note. Find your way home, this is your lesson. No food, no water, no goodbye, just trees, silence, and the kind of betrayal that doesn't scream, it lingers. I was 18, they called it parenting. I called it the day I died in their eyes. But I didn't stay broken, I didn't disappear. What they thought would break me built something they never saw coming. My name is Brian Whitaker, and this isn't just a survival story, it's a reckoning. Let me show you how it began. The summer heat clung to the trees at Black Hollow Campground in Montana, casting long, wavering shadows over the dirt. The Whitaker family had arrived earlier that morning. Thomas, the father with his militant composure. Evelyn, the mother with her suffocating control masked as care. Emily, the silent older sister, and Brian, the youngest, freshly 18, still naively hoping this rare family outing might mean something. Lunch was cold sandwiches and bottled water eaten in silence. No lectures, no barked commands. Thomas leaned back in his folding chair, gazing at the pine canopy. Evelyn's smile was oddly soft, her voice unusually gentle. The air was still, but thick with something unspoken. Brian felt it, but couldn't name it. Emily did too. He could see it in the fleeting, worried glance she gave him. After the meal, Thomas looked up. "Brian, go gather some firewood. We'll need a fire tonight." Evelyn added, almost tenderly, "It's not far. Just grab a few dry branches." Brian hesitated, the sudden kindness feeling foreign, but nodded. Emily opened her mouth as if to protest, then stopped, biting her lip. He walked into the woods, the crunch of dry leaves beneath his feet the only sound. Finding usable wood took longer than expected. Every time he knelt to pick up a branch, a knot of unease tugged at his gut. 30 minutes later, he returned to find nothing. No tent, no bags, no SUV, no family. Just a folded piece of paper resting on the stone where they had lunched. Find your way home, this is your lesson. Brian stood frozen, then panic set in. He shouted into the trees, "Mom, Dad, Emily?" But only the wind answered. The campground was deserted, his phone had no signal. Sweat beaded on his brow as he stumbled down the trail, desperate for service. After 2 miles, a faint bar flickered on his screen. He called 911. The dispatcher's calm voice steadied him as he gave his location. The Missoula County Sheriff's SUV rolled up an hour later. In the station, Brian sat still, wrapped in a shock he hadn't yet processed. Then, Thomas and Evelyn arrived, dry, collected, untouched by worry. When the officer questioned them, Thomas replied coolly, "He's 18. This was a test, a life lesson." Evelyn chimed in, "We did this out of love. He needs to grow." Brian said nothing, but something inside him broke and rebuilt. The door opened. Uncle Mike walked in, his face thunderous. "What the hell kind of lesson do you think that was?" he barked at Thomas. Turning to Brian, his voice softened. "Come with me, kid. You don't belong with people like that." Brian stood up, looked once, only once, at the parents who abandoned him. "I'm not your son anymore," he said. Chapter 2. The beginning of someone new. Redmond, Oregon was a different world. Uncle Mike's house stood nestled beneath towering pine trees, its porch worn but welcoming, its windows glowing with warmth. The scent of fresh-baked cookies and wood smoke lingered in the air. Comfort Brian had never known before. For the first time in his life, there were no orders barked, no conditions, no manipulations. Just soft-spoken questions, space to breathe, and someone who listened. Brian unpacked in silence, overwhelmed not by grief, but by unfamiliar peace. He studied obsessively for his college entrance exams, shutting out everything else. On acceptance day, a single envelope changed everything. University of Oregon, Eugene. No one cheered, no one needed to. Mike simply nodded and offered to drive him. That was enough. College life was a grind. Brian juggled classes with a 5 a.m. shift at Timberline Cafe, serving regulars, scrubbing mugs, steaming milk. But there, in the rhythm of routine and anonymity, he began to heal. In his small dorm room, he read books on survival, watched wilderness documentaries, practiced tying knots, starting fires, purifying water. It wasn't just survival knowledge, it was therapy. Then came the spark. He uploaded a short video. What to do if you're lost in the forest without a phone? Shot on an old phone, it showed a calm, methodical Brian explaining how to find north using the sun. Overnight, it went viral. The comments flooded in, people were watching, listening. Encouraged, Brian launched more videos, starting a fire with no matches, basic shelter building, first aid without a kit. One by one, his audience grew. Months later, he applied for a small loan, took a leap of faith, and launched High Ridge Survival Institute in Bend, Oregon. It started with weekend workshops, then full immersion programs, then partnerships with schools, rescue teams, even law enforcement. Brian wasn't just a survival expert, he was a voice, a mentor, a symbol. In the quiet hours before dawn, sometimes he sat on his porch, coffee in hand, wondering how far he'd come from Black Hollow. The answer was always the same: far enough to never go back. It had been 10 years of silence, 10 years of peace, when Brian's phone lit up with a flood of missed calls, 42 of them, all from Evelyn. The messages that followed were laced with desperation. "Brian, please, we need your help. We're going to lose the house. Your father's sick. We were wrong." But Brian said nothing. He stared at the screen, then turned it off. A week later, they appeared at the High Ridge Survival Institute without warning. The lobby buzzed with energy, staff moving between training modules, wooden beams catching the afternoon light, the logo glinting proudly on the wall. Then everything slowed as Evelyn and Thomas walked in. Evelyn's eyes were wet, arms open, voice trembling. "Brian," she whispered, stepping forward to hug him. He stood still. Thomas, stoic but worn, said, "We're in trouble, son. The bank's foreclosing. We just need a little help. $150,000. That's all." Brian said nothing for a long moment. He studied them, not with hate but with precision. Then, calmly, he replied, "I'll help if you can survive 3 days in Black Hollow. Alone. No assistance, like you made me do." Evelyn gasped. Thomas slammed his palm against the conference table. "Are you out of your damn mind?" Brian didn't flinch. "It's just a lesson, like you always taught me." They left in fury. 1 week later, the storm hit. A video exploded across social media. Brian, sitting in his office, speaking coldly into the camera. "I will abandon you in the forest." That was all. No context, no lead-up, no conditions. The internet responded with rage. The headlines came fast and sharp. Butler's son turns on aging parents. Survival guru leaves parents to die. Raised by wolves, the fall of Brian Whitaker. Within days, contracts were cancelled, sponsors pulled out, staff members questioned everything. The weight of 10 years of resilience cracked under the pressure of a 30-second lie. Brian didn't sleep, didn't speak. He stared at screens as his reputation unraveled again at the hands of the very people who once left him for dead. The past hadn't just returned, it had declared war. Chapter 4: The Flames of the Media. The silence inside Brian's office was deafening. The video played on every screen. Comment threads burned with betrayal. People weren't just angry, they were convinced. Betraying your parents? In America, that was unforgivable. The narrative was simple, clean and brutal. Brian had made it, and now he'd tossed the very people who raised him aside like garbage. His staff avoided eye contact. Board members called emergency meetings. A major speaking tour was cancelled within 24 hours. Ben's community, once proud of their hometown hero, turned cold. Then a phone call. Emily's voice came through, low and urgent. "I need to see you, now." They met at Timberline Cafe, tucked into a quiet corner. She didn't waste time. "They tricked me too," she said. "Said it was for real estate. I gave them money. They lost it gambling. I should have known they'd come for you next." Her hands trembled as she held her coffee. "I didn't speak up back then, but I will now. I'll tell them everything." Brian exhaled, the first real breath in days. He called a press conference. The media packed into High Ridge. Lights, cameras, suspicion. Brian walked to the front. No lawyer beside him, no notes in hand. He hit play. On the screen behind him, the security footage played. Evelyn and Thomas begging for money, Brian's calm condition, their refusal, their storming out. No edits, no performance, just truth. The room was silent. Then Emily stood. She told them about growing up under cold stares and impossible expectations, about being punished for helping her brother, about being conned by the same people who now played victims. Her voice didn't crack, but her pain was clear. The press didn't speak, not at first. But when they did, the tone had shifted. Manipulated by their own parents. Media caught in lie. The real lesson behind Brian Whittaker's silence. The hashtags flipped. Justice for Brian trended across platforms. The video went viral. This time, the full story. Apologies rolled in, speaking engagements were rebooked. But more than that, Brian finally had what had eluded him for so long. He had the truth, and the world finally believed it. It was a grey morning in Redmond. Rain whispered against the porch as Brian sat by the kitchen window, sipping coffee in silence. Uncle Mike glanced up from the newspaper and paused. "There's someone at the door," he said. Brian didn't move. The knocking turned to pounding, then voices, one male, one female, familiar. Outside, Evelyn sobbed, her voice rising through the drizzle. "Brian, please, baby, talk to us. We've lost everything. We have nowhere else to go." Thomas stood beside her, arms crossed, face cold but desperate. "Brian," he called out firmly, "you're still our son." Uncle Mike looked at Brian. "You want to face them?" Brian nodded, but he didn't step out. He opened the door just a crack, enough to see them, but not enough to invite them in. Evelyn's mascara had streaked down her face, her hands trembling. "We're sorry," she pleaded. "I was wrong. Your father and I, we didn't know. Please forgive us." Thomas's voice followed, stiff as always. "We're still family, Brian. That should count for something." Brian's voice was calm, quiet. Family is where there's love. You gave me life, yes, but never once did you show me how to live it with love." Evelyn cried louder. "We made you strong. Everything you have now is because of how we raised you." Brian's eyes didn't flinch. "No, I succeeded in spite of you, not because of you. I learned how to survive because I had no other choice." Then came the final words, sharp, unwavering. "From this moment on, I am no longer your son." He closed the door. Click. Final. Inside, Brian pulled out his phone and blocked every number tied to their names. Then, without hesitation, he contacted local police and his company's security director. "If they ever show up again," he said, "call 911 immediately." Days later, Emily arrived in Redmond. She brought no luggage, only relief. "I'm done with them too," she said, simply. She moved into a nearby house, close, safe. The family they were born into had finally crumbled, and in its place something stronger had grown. Chapter 6, Love-Built Family. A year later, Bend was buzzing with change. High Ridge Survival Institute had expanded nationwide, running programs for schools, first responders, and wilderness enthusiasts across the country. Brian had just returned from receiving a formal commendation from the governor of Oregon for his contribution to public training and safety. But this morning, none of that mattered. At Timberline Cafe, tucked in the corner booth where the wood creaked just right and the light filtered through aged glass, Brian sat with Emily and Uncle Mike. Plates of eggs, toast, and fresh black coffee sat between them, half-eaten, forgotten in conversation. They laughed about a student who had panicked over a squirrel on their last training hike. Emily teased Brian about his old flannel shirts that somehow became a brand signature. Uncle Mike chimed in with a story from his youth, voice warm and steady. At a pause, Brian looked at them. Really looked. "You know," he said, "family isn't who gave you life, it's who gave you love." Neither of them replied with words. They didn't need to. Later that afternoon, back at his office, Brian sat at his desk with the blinds open, the Oregon sun casting soft shadows across the wood. He placed a new photo frame beside his computer, him, Emily, and Mike, arms slung across each other's shoulders, grins wide, eyes real. He leaned back, gaze stretching past the windows out into the trees. No tension, no weight, just peace. Then came the voice, not aloud, but in his mind. His own, older, wiser. If you were me, would you have forgiven? Or walked away? My story's over, yours, well, it's just beginning. Sometimes the people meant to protect us are the very ones who leave the deepest scars. But pain, when faced head-on, doesn't just wound, it shapes. It teaches us how to build boundaries, how to choose our own definition of love, and how to walk away with grace when staying means losing ourselves. Healing isn't about forgetting, it's about remembering without breaking. If this story stirred something in you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your perspective in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow for more stories that challenge, move, and remind us who we are.